Hi, I'm Owen, the host of the Australian Finance Podcast. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Betashares, one of the leading providers of ETFs here in Australia. Serving thousands of financial advisors and over 1 million investors, Betashares manages tens of billions of dollars on behalf of investors right across the country. I'm proud to partner with Betashares on the Australian Finance Podcast, Australia's premier financial podcast, because there is great alignment in the long-term philosophy shared by both businesses. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information. Hello and welcome to this episode on the Australian Finance Podcast, joined by Gemma Mitchell. How are you going?
I'm good, thanks.
We're talking about all things incoming. Well, we're going to talk about how to get a pay rise, or at least kind of talk about it, how to maximize that amount of money that hits your bank statement, whether it's every month, every fortnight, every week, however you get paid. We're going to talk about all of those types of things. But here's a question for you. Why on earth would we talk about such a thing on a finance podcast?
Well, that's a good question. But income really is the main driver of our ability to build wealth, right? Now, the misconception is that the more income you earn, the more you'll be able to save and all of those things. We talked about it in a previous episode, that people think that they can out-earn their bad spending habits. Absolutely not. So it's not about having a huge paycheck. It's actually what you do with that money, how much you keep and how much you make, like you turn into other assets that then start producing income for you. So income is very, very important for you to be able to build wealth, and you need to earn an income so that you can then create assets that will then go to work for you when you don't want to work anymore.
Now, you're a qualified financial advisor, so maybe I can ask you this. Financial advisors are known to be some of the funniest people on the planet.
We're hilarious.
Oh, yeah. And I've heard of a financial planning joke, which is the number one piece of advice is to earn more. Is that true or false?
I've never said that, but maybe I will. No, I definitely don't agree, because you can't out-earn your bad habits.
Okay,
unfortunately, I wish that was the solution. I honestly wish it was, because there is no cap to our earning potential, but there is a limit on how much we can cut our expenses. But everybody's go-to solution to build wealth or whatever, to get ahead, is to cut their expenses. There is only so far you can cut them. So I wish the solution was just earn money. It is that, but it's also what you do with it.
Okay. So when we think about, if we're just thinking about, just for a moment, if I could get you to put your thinking cap on and just focus on that money that hits our account every month. You mentioned that there is a cap on how far your expenses can go down, because realistically, like, you do have to pay for things. But then why is the income such an important focus?
So your ability to bring in income is what you can then use to save, invest, get your housing, all of those, build assets that are then going to appreciate in value. So you need to have an income and be able to keep a portion of that and not be spending it all, so that you can build assets. It's like the goal should be, through your working life, to convert your income to assets that then becomes income. Because as much as, like, regardless if we like it or not, money impacts every aspect of our life, our health, everything, us being able to afford, great food and healthcare and all of those types of things. So when we stop working and our income's gone, we need the assets that are then going to provide that income for us.
I often remark on the show, Gem, that I think the two words that matter most when it comes to growing wealthy is accumulate assets. I don't care which ones, just accumulate them. A lot of people get bogged down in, but do I buy shares or property? Is it an ETF, or do I invest in this handbag that might appreciate in value? Whatever the case may be.
I feel attacked.
But whatever the case may be, there's different types of assets, which we'll cover in future episodes. But I feel like if you could boil it down, it's just accumulate them. Like a bit of this, bit of that, sure, do that. The problem is that you need the money in the first place to do that. Yes. So I'm going to hand the reins over to you and say, okay, you've got a few minutes to explain to us, what do we need to know about salary income, passive income, active income, all those different types of things? What do we need to know?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different levers, and that's the most important thing that people need to understand. So just like you touched on with assets, there are so many different ways and different assets that you can have that are then going to build your wealth, fund your lifestyle. So there's not just one way to do things. And that is exactly the same with income. There's not just one way to earn income. There is like employment income, which most of us are very familiar with, going to a job, exchanging our time for money, taxes taken out, potentially supers paid, that type of stuff. We've got that income and we're potentially getting pay rises. We might get bonuses. So there's income there that we do from work. There's income that we get from investing. We might set up a business. You were talking about earlier about the 4 quadrants of income.
Yeah. Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, for anyone that's read the book, and it profiles 2 different dads, so to speak. One is the one that has a lot of money and is more like, I would say, growth mindset, like the way I approach money, and the other one's a bit more frugal and what have you. And it just goes through this idea of the cash flow quadrants. And there's, imagine like 4 corners on a page or in a box. Top left corner, you've got your salary, which is like PAYG, 9 to 5. Bottom left corner is your contracting. So you might be able to take what you know from your job and become a sole trader. It's very common. Like if you're a gardener and you work on a salary, but then you're like, well, I could probably do this myself. I'll do it myself. That's bottom left corner. You might earn a bit more, but there's a bit more. You don't get sick leave. You don't get all that stuff. Top right corner is you start a business. This is where you put in heaps of effort, stress. You know the drill. I know the drill. A lot of people listening know the drill. It's not all it's cracked up to be. But you can make a lot of money that way. And then the bottom right corner, which is the 4th quadrant, that's all about investing. So investing in someone else's business, investing in property, investing in assets. And the good news about the wonderful country that we live in is you can go from the top left corner, if you want to, you don't have to, but you can go straight from that to a side hustle, which is the bottom left. So do this both at the same time to test out if your business idea works. And then you've got a business. Or you could just go straight to investing. Or you could do all of them in one go, which a lot of people listening to this do.
Yeah.
I think everyone here in the Rask office has a side hustle.
Yes.
Maybe except for Mitch. I know he's part of a book club, but I don't think he makes money from his book club. So I need to explore that with him. But that's the idea. And that was covered in Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is really, really interesting way to think about it.
And that's exactly like we talk about assets, like diversifying our share portfolio or the different assets that we have. Diversifying your income is actually really important as well. So if you think of you just relying on employment income and then you losing your job or your ability to work due to sickness or whatever, like diversifying your income is very, very important as well. So if you have the opportunity to do that, diversify your skills, do a side hustle or have like a business or something else on the side, it can mean that you're mitigating a lot of risks.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you've got multiple income streams. There was an IRS study done, this is quite a few years ago, in the United States. It's like their version of the ATO. And they found that millionaires on average have 7 sources of income.
Yes.
It was kind of like buried in this old like PDF. You can dig it up. And it showed, they would have like a property where they get some rental income, or they might have dividends from shares, might have interest from a bank account, all these different little things.
Yes.
And in the beginning, those aren't big things, but they kind of snowball through time.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's just like compounding on your investments, your income. And when you add more resources, potentially it is a small amount, but when it's coming in consistently and there's a few different income streams coming in, it might be actually enough for you to replace your employment income, which is the goal, right? We want to make sure that whatever we're doing, we have choice. So if we're going to work, we want to be going because we love it and we want to be there. And if we don't, we want the choice to be able to go, stuff this, I'm out.
And it's so important for people that are in retirement because that's effectively what you've done. You're now, flicking the switch and you've gone from active income to passive income. And a lot of people struggle to make that change if they haven't invested earlier in life, but it's so important. A few years ago, we had Associate Professor Sam Wiley on the show, economics professor, and he was saying that it's pretty simple, really. All you got to do is specialize in your career and diversify in your investments. And I love that turn of phrase because he's saying if you become really good at something, there's a risk that you become really good at something that becomes redundant, but you can become really good at something, like you're a specialist plumber or a specialist doctor, like you get paid more than the average plumber or the average doctor, for example. So you earn more money. And then in your investments, we know that diversification is a really important attribute. So it's a really interesting way to think about those. How about then for you, Gem, in terms of side hustles and these types of things? Like you're a money coach, financial advisor. Is that something that you talk about a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. So with money coaching, we do talk about different ways that you could be doing your income. And it might be where we are helping people. So when I say we, there's a few money coaches that I work with, you know, Lexi Smith, who's been on before, and Karen. So we'll actually talk to people about, well, what is your strategy? Maybe it's going for a pay rise. Maybe you have a dream to set up another business, or maybe you just have a skill that could bring in more money. It's not necessarily, you know, the end goal, but it's a means to an end at the moment. So we can help identify different ways of looking at that. And I think it's also really important when you're doing that to understand the trade-off. So we talk about side hustles. It's a bit of a buzzword, you know, it's, for a while now, a few years now, it's been the focus, but it's this hustle culture. Like, do we want to keep hustling, or is there smarter choices that we can make? So having that, like a money coach conversation where you're kind of stress testing ideas, it's like, yeah, you could do that, but is the trade-off worth it? And if it is, great. If it's a short period of time, or if it's going to make a substantial difference and the trade-off is worth it, great. But you kind of want to look at, well, yeah, what need do I want met from that? Is it a creative outlet? Is it the more income, and what does it look like? But there's so many different levers that you can pull to increase your income. So you can build assets, you could get a pay rise, you could change jobs to get a pay rise. So you know how we talk about sometimes it's often easier to go to a new employer and get a higher pay than to work your way up in a company. It might be changing industries completely, and that might be a long-term gain. Like you might have to do some study, you might have to work towards things. It doesn't necessarily need to be an immediate thing for you to increase your income, but generally increasing your income is going to help over the long term, give you more choices. And if you can be aware of lifestyle creep and use the extra income for good and not evil lifestyle creep, then it doesn't have to be an immediate overnight thing. It could be something that you're working towards over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I love that idea, that reminder about side hustles. I think there are kind of maybe three primary reasons that you would do it. One is if you're wanting to test out a business idea, I think that's a great way to de-risk the venture. You know, if you try it as a side hustle at first, you get no reception, no money, no income, no sales, no nothing.
Or you hate it.
Yeah, or you hate it. It's probably not what you want to do. So don't worry about it. Focus on your career. But then the other one would be like to try and accelerate out of, assuming that it's just like a pretty simple side hustle, like driving for Uber or something like this. Or even maybe your side hustle is working at Bunnings on a Saturday and you love that. I would love that. And then the third thing is, so that's to try and help you get out of, you know, maybe debt or something like that, use the extra income. And then the third thing I would say would probably be like to accelerate yourself to a financial goal. So yeah, I need to save extra money for a home deposit or something like that. And so you might willingly make the sacrifice to earn a bit more.
I think there's a fourth one in there, that sometimes side hustles and income and even businesses are born out of the desire wasn't to earn extra income. It was a hobby or a passion that then turned into that. And I think they're actually the best ones, the ones that it wasn't a chore, it just naturally kind of evolved. But that's pretty, I think that's pretty rare. But yeah, if you can turn your hobby, your passion into income, I think that's a great thing as well. Yeah.
So you mentioned something which I'll double click on before we move on, which is this idea of lifestyle creep or lifestyle inflation.
Yes.
What is that and how do we control for it?
Yeah, so lifestyle inflation is when we're earning more money and so our expenses are also going up, but they're our discretionary expenses. So these aren't, you know, our grocery bills and our electricity and all of those things that are. It's our discretionary spending. So we're potentially getting the bigger house, getting the flasher car, all of these types of things, which is natural for us to improve our as our financial situation improves, but we want to be really intentional with it. And is that actually adding value? Or was it is it an unconscious thing that's happening that we are actually just spending? Because more money isn't going to make you better with money. It's not going to make you build assets sooner. It's what you do with the money that you've actually got. So if you, more money is going to help, but you still need to have those foundations and the good habits that can actually mean that that extra money is going to go towards funding your goals and not get eaten up in the day-to-day of us just existing and now having that lifestyle creep.
Yeah. It's something that I see most people that have like an active budget, so they monitor it, they recap it, or they do the date night type things. They tend to be all across that. It's the people that don't really have those kind of clear processes, systems, values, whatever you want to call it, in place. They're the ones that tend to just spend more as they earn more.
Yes, and it's like it's common to get a pay rise, like even if it's inflation, you might get that at the new financial year. So being really intentional with that money, and potentially you actually go, oh, that's going to really help me because I'm struggling with the bills, or I want to build an emergency fund, or maybe you say, I don't actually have any plans for that, or I want to have a bit more discretionary. Like it doesn't always have to be, oh, I'm going to invest this and build my wealth. You just need to be intentional with what you're doing with that money. And like I say, with a budget, it's not about being restrictive. It's about telling your money where to go rather than wondering where it went, which is exactly like having more income coming in, whether it's dividends or rental income or getting a pay rise. You want to know where that money is then going and make sure that it's adding value to your life now or to future you.
So, my partner is very much on the camp of she's in a PAYG position, and when it comes to like money in our bank account, let's sum it up like that, her first reaction is expenses. And I think we live like we spend, mostly me, on some things that we could probably rein in a little bit, but I think we're pretty good. Whereas you ask her, it's like there's always more work to be done on the expenses side of the ledger, so to speak. If someone's listening to this and maybe it's their first time hearing a conversation, well, yeah, actually, I could be more active in the way I go about trying to earn more money. Where does that, or how does that start?
Yes. So like anything, I think we've talked about this in every episode. It's like with reflection and awareness, right? It's like, right, what am I earning? What are the levers that I have available? Is it likely that I can get a pay rise? So I'm very aware of like limiting beliefs. Like a lot of the time we might think, oh, I'm at the top of my company, or my company hasn't done that well. They probably can't pay. Like we tell ourselves stories, and we need to look for evidence of that. But potentially, just because that isn't an avenue, it doesn't mean that there's other things that are off the table. So regardless if you want to do them or not, you've got to be aware of what your options are. So just start brainstorming. Like we've got some tools that will link to it, but brainstorming all the different ways that you could earn income, and then going, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. Oh, the thought of like going to a new company. No, it's a trade-off, right? So you go, right, well, I could do that, but maybe I'll settle for this, or maybe I'll do that. And I think just asking, like applying for a job, the worst you'll get is no. Asking for a pay rise, the worst you'll get is no. But being prepared as well. So one of the things I talk to people about is how you need to prepare for a pay rise if you're going to go talk to your manager. Like how you prepare for that is so important. And then being prepared for a no. And what are you going to do? Is that, okay, and just go back to your desk? Or is it, can we have another conversation in 3 months? Or are there other benefits I could get, like some work from home or some flexible or whatever? Would there be something that actually means more to me than the money anyway? Just having your,
like a Friday afternoon off.
Else? Yeah. It might be a flex day, or it might be a later afternoon, or extra holiday time. Like potentially your company really values you, but they can't give you more money. But we don't need money for the sake of it. We want money for experiences and our values. So potentially you could get that a different way.
Yeah. So I just want to quickly double click on something. So we will include a lot of resources in the show notes. You mentioned this idea of preparing for a pay rise without giving away everything that would be in your notes. What are just some of the things, like, because I feel like for a lot of people, I feel like women in particular, dare I say, do tend to struggle with asking for more.
Yes.
So what would be your high level kind of advice to them?
Yeah. So this is something that I haven't done well in my career, and I really struggle with confrontation, and I feel like a conversation around pay is quite confrontational. So how I recommend people do it is, one, find what works for you, but how it works for me when I have difficult conversations like this is, like, you need to prepare, right? So you should be already having a folder or whatever of all your achievements and where you've added value or added efficiencies and all of that, so that you can be really proud and also know that you're deserving of that. Like, you want to back up your claims to them, but also to yourself for confidence. So you should have all of that. But I find that me emailing it through first means that if I get in front of somebody and I go blank because I'm nervous or whatever, the points are already there. It's already out in the open. They already know. So that works for me, but you would just find what works for you. But you need to prepare for it. You need to have the evidence to back it up and your thoughts and really be really intentional with it. Now, the next thing is you need to set time. Do not talk to your manager as they're running out the door on a Friday and be like, hey, you want to talk about a pay rise? You need to put some time in their diary, let them know what it's actually for, be really respectful of that conversation. And it needs to, just like couples talking about finance, it needs to come from a place of a calm conversation, prepared, not some conflict. Yeah. So couples should never talk about money as a result of a fight, conflict, and you shouldn't be talking to your boss about it in the same situation. It should be something that you've prepared for, you've both set aside time, you actually have the time to dive into it. Prepared, set the time aside. If you need to, send the notes over earlier so that you've got all your points, and then be prepared for a no and what you want to happen out of that. If it's a follow-up, is there some other things we can consider? Is there feedback, or am I going to walk,
Yeah. Yeah. So the kind of what if, you can draw on a little flow chart. If they say this, then what would I do from that point?
Yeah, exactly. Because you don't want to be in that conversation and then be like, oh, I haven't thought about this. You want to really prepare for it. And that will help them as well, because they might be like, I'm really sorry. I wish I could. And then you go, okay, well, here's some other things that I've considered. Could you investigate them and come back to me next week or something?
Yeah. In a bigger business, it's often not your boss that you're convincing, it's your boss's boss.
Yes.
Because they have to then take it to their superior to be like, hey, Gemma asks for a pay rise. Do we have it in the budget, kind of thing? Because they might not have direct control. So making the case and presenting in the right way is really important. I also do what you say with the write it out and send it first, because it just breaks the ice in terms of they know what it's about.
Yes.
They've got it in front of them. Sometimes they're not really respectful and you've got to know who you're dealing with. And maybe they're never going to give you a pay rise, but at least you tried.
Yes.
And you know who you're up against anyway, so you can walk away.
Yeah.
But I think that's really important for me. It's kind of like one of my automatic rules, Gem, is an automatic rule is something that's it's just something that automatically happens in my life. So I don't think about it anymore. And a good one is in a conversation or in a commercial conversation in business or my personal life, I'm pretty flexible. Everyone who's negotiated with me would know this. I'm pretty relaxed.
No.
Yeah. I'm pretty relaxed. I'm pretty yeah, that sounds good. A bit of a yes man kind of thing. But that's because I don't like that sticky conversation part. That's why I never agree to anything in person. I don't do phone calls. It's either written down. It could be a text, but it's not a phone call. It could be an email, but it's not a phone call, or it's not an in-person meeting.
Yeah.
It's all documented. It's all written, because I'm saying that from a position of where I don't feel under pressure.
Yes.
And to be honest, it also gets it in writing, which is nice to have too. So I give that advice to anyone listening.
And I think it's nice to gift that to somebody else as well, that they have time, they're not put on the spot, and they get to formulate their opinions. And so I talk about this a fair bit with my money mindset. So I had lots of we had conflicts in my marriage with my ex-husband. So he would come to me with I went to the mechanic and it was X amount. And I would just get super panicky and it would cause all tension and all this kind of stuff. But then within 20 minutes, I was like, oh yeah, well, we've just got that. We've got that. Where so if he, not that this was anything to do with him, but I'm now realizing if I get a heads up, I have time to cope. But if I have to deal with it right then, it caused a lot of panic. So that's also about, me, if I was going for a pay rise, I'd be like, I'll send the points over in case I freeze and can't get my words out. And then I can be like, well, as per my email,
Yeah.
So I need time to process information before I make comments and decisions. So I prefer that as well.
Yeah, sometimes the HR team can be a source of advice. If you're in a bigger business, they can be a source of advice. You can do market research. You can go to Seek. You can go to Indeed. You can look on all these different websites.
And be really prepared of what is market rates and things. And I think also thinking of your, in that situation, so your manager has a boss as well, thinking of your manager, you know them best, right? But them as a person as well, that they also are likely having to have this type of conversation with their boss. they're just a person, right?
Yeah.
So I think kind
absolutely.
of seeing that human element as well, and then just being respectful of the time.
I often think, Gemma, maybe I'm giving away a bit of my secret sauce here, but I often think the person that you're convincing is not the one in the room. And I think that's really important. And maybe it's because of this podcast, like I've become attuned to having, a third person listening. But for me, it's always been that there's someone else. So I'm giving you the resources to convince them.
Yes.
And that's what I want to make your life easy. So when you go to your boss, or if you're a business owner, imagine the business is that third party. I'm making it so easy to demonstrate how much value I've added to the business and why I'm going to keep adding more value because I've done this course. I'm taking responsibility of that and I want to grow the business this way. And you as the business owner think, well, that's good for the business, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Great. And just making that conversation easy for them.
Yeah, and taking out as much of the decision fatigue as possible, being like, well, these are all of the things that back this up. And even if it's, a small business or what, you're rarely talking to the top person, right? Because there might be a board or there might be, a family or whatever. There's other people in the chain kind of regardless of where you are. So them being able to then go into bat for you is really, really helpful.
Yeah. I'd love to know what you have done as a side hustle. If you're watching this, you can leave it in the YouTube comments or send via the link that says ask a question. You can send us what you've done to earn more money. Probably maybe keep it fun, keep it PG, but what have you done? It'd be fun to hear from you and to hear what resources you've used to grow your income. Maybe you've switched careers recently and you've got a money win that you want us to celebrate. Send it in. I love hearing that sort of stuff. So it's really good juju. And at the end of this 10-part series, we're going to do a bonus where Gemma and I will answer your questions, but we'll also share feedback and share really positive stories with the rest of the community. So if you are in that camp, you've recently switched jobs, maybe started a new career, or you just want to ask a question about how you could go about things, write into us. We'd love to hear from you. The link is in your podcast player or YouTube description. So just rounding out this episode, Gemma, if people want to get support in trying to earn more, trying to get a better handle on their income overall, who can they go to for help?
So there's a few different experts. So like anything, you could try and DIY it. There's great resources out there. You can get a lot of information. You can go on career sites and stuff like that. But if you're wanting a professional, you could speak to an accountant about how you structure your income, how you structure income and your assets so it's most tax effective, because tax is such a big consideration. Potentially you talk to a financial advisor about what are the assets that that suit you to build. Maybe you're talking to a money coach about how you go about getting a pay rise.
Yeah, to help you through that.
Yeah. So it's those types of things, and it might be like a book that just gives you confidence on what other income sources. But the most important thing is I don't want people to ever feel stuck that the position that they're in right now is the only solution, because there are so many different ways that you can change your financial situation by getting help, doing some things yourself, or a combination of both.
Yeah, absolutely. Some fantastic books and resources out there, other podcasts, so many good things. But you can get in touch with us via the link in the show notes or in the description on YouTube. Well, Gemma, the next episode is all about debt. So we're going to go to the other side of the ledger. We're going to talk about the stuff that people don't really like in their lives, but I'm going to explain why maybe some of it's okay. Some of it might even be good. That's coming up in the next episode. So this was heaps of fun covering everything on income. Thanks for joining me.
See you next one.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. I'm going to walk you through the Betashares Yield Maximizer Fund, or YMAX for short. That's YMAX. It's a very popular ETF listed here on the Australian Stock Exchange. Now, this ETF is going to require some explaining, but I have to do it in quick time because this is a rapid review. With this ETF, what you're getting is exposure to Australian shares with a twist. When you invest in ETFs that invest in Australian shares, meaning you make one investment into the ETF and then your money is diversified, you typically end up with shares like Commonwealth Bank, Woolworths, and these types of big blue chip companies, which can pay tax-effective income to you as an investor. Crucially, whenever you invest in an ETF, there's something that you need to understand. Yes, you still get franking credits if it invests in Australian shares. Yes, you still get dividends. We just call it distributions because as it passes through the ETF, it's called a distribution since it's distributed to you. Yes, you still can make capital growth from your investment. But what happens if the shares inside of the ETF aren't growing as fast as you think, or not paying as much in dividends as they did in the past? Those shares are still inside the ETF, but now you don't get as much income. That's where an ETF like YMAX comes in. Investors can use an ETF like this to get exposure to a portfolio of shares with an extra twist. What YMAX does is it takes that portfolio of shares and then uses something called a covered call strategy to enhance the income of that portfolio. Hence why some people call these strategies enhanced income or enhanced equity income. What effectively is happening is Betashares holds a core portfolio of ETFs and then uses these call strategies, covered call strategies, which is a type of derivative. You don't need to worry about all the details in this rapid review, but what it does is it uses these derivatives over the top of this core portfolio to produce an extra small little bit of income that adds to the dividends that are inside and paid by the shares already held. This strategy is extremely popular throughout the world, but here in Australia, since the shares already pay consistent income, it's not as popular. But Betashares, through this ETF, has developed this strategy to enable investors to get an enhanced income on top of what's already paid from the dividends and shares inside the ETF. This is quite interesting because effectively what you can use this strategy to do is to get more income over time, and particularly if the shares inside no longer pay as high dividends as they once did, or if the growth is a little bit lackluster for a period of time. Now, there are risks to using this strategy. For example, if the ETF was to go up rapidly, what happens to the call strategy is that some of your upside may be limited. So you may give up some upside in order to get more income. You're kind of swapping some of the growth for more of the income. Now, you can visit the Betashares website to find out more about this strategy by going into the PDS for YMAX. Or there's other literature that is available on the betashares.com.au website. If you just search for YMAX, it will explain the strategy in more detail. It's also really important to understand that some of these strategies indeed pay you more income, but from time to time you will give up more growth. So you don't necessarily want to rob Peter to pay Paul. You want a strategy that returns, in total return terms, being income and growth, a suitable amount. At the time of recording, for example, the YMAX ETF has a distribution yield of around 8%. That gives you an indication that that's considerably above the income yield from the broad market or that broad portfolio of shares through the enhanced component of income. So if, for example, the market was to go sideways, the enhanced component of income becomes more important because you are indeed getting an extra little bit of income on top of the dividends already paid. So study this ETF's total returns, being the income plus the growth over the long term, and consider if it's right for you before making a decision to invest. You can speak to your financial advisor, but also check out the PDS and TMD, that's the target market determination, on the YMAX fund. From there, you would consider if this ETF should be part of a core portfolio or as part of a satellite tilt where you tilt an existing core portfolio to income. This is the rapid review of the YMAX ETF. Be sure to check out the PDS and TMD available on the betashares.com.au website. Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.